Hey there and welcome back. Today we're going to do a deep dive into something you might not expect to find at the heart of religion: trial and error. We've got this fascinating academic article that explores how the Baha'i Faith actually sees trial and error as like a core principle. And not just for like personal growth, but for societal progress too.
Yeah. It's kind of a radical idea when you really think about it. Approaching the path to a more just and unified world as one giant real-world experiment.
Okay, so let's unpack that a little. What makes the Baha'i Faith's perspective on trial and error different? I mean, it's not just about messing up and hoping for the best, is it?
Definitely not. It's more about, consciously putting ideas into practice, closely observing the outcomes, successes, and failures, and then refining our approach based on what we learn. It's this continuous cycle of action, reflection,
and adaptation. So it's less about seeking a fixed answer and more about constantly evolving our understanding. That actually leads to one of the most compelling insights from the article: the idea of truth as an evolving concept. It really challenges the ingrained human desire for absolute certainty, doesn't it?
Absolutely. This concept of evolving truth, it has profound implications.
It's
It fosters humility by acknowledging we don't have all the answers. And it encourages lifelong learning and exploration, which, let's be honest, can be a bit uncomfortable for us humans. We tend to crave certainty.
Oh, for sure. It's so easy to get attached to our own beliefs and assumptions, even when the evidence suggests otherwise. This makes me think about those times when I've been so convinced I was right about something, only to later realize I had totally missed the mark. It's a humbling experience, to say the least.
Yeah, the article delves into this, outlining 3 key psychological barriers that we all face when trying to embrace trial and error. So first, as we've touched on, is this craving for certainty. It's comforting to think we have all the answers, even if those answers might be incomplete or inaccurate.
Right. And then there's the fear of failure, which is something I think everyone can relate to. Making mistakes can feel demoralizing. But the article actually frames mistakes as incredibly valuable learning opportunities, which is a perspective I'm trying to embrace more in my own life.
Absolutely. Mistakes are inevitable, but they offer invaluable feedback that allows us to grow and evolve. Then the third barrier the article explores is something we've both mentioned: cognitive biases. This is where we filter information through our existing beliefs and assumptions, often unconsciously.
So even when we're trying to be objective, those biases can sneak in and color our perceptions. What kind of impact can that have on this process of trial and error, especially when we're trying to create positive change in the world?
Well, imagine a community trying to address a complex social issue. They've developed a solution they truly believe in, but they're so attached to their initial idea that they might overlook or even misinterpret evidence. That suggests their approach isn't as effective as they hoped. Those cognitive biases can create a real blind spot, hindering progress.
That makes a lot of sense. It highlights how crucial it is to be aware of those biases and to actively seek out diverse perspectives. But these psychological barriers aren't the only challenges, are they? The article also points to some cultural and historical factors. They can make it difficult to fully embrace this principle of trial and error.
Right. Even though the Baha'i Faith doesn't have a clergy, in the traditional sense, we still carry the legacy of rigid religious structures and hierarchical systems. It can be a real challenge to break free from those ingrained patterns of thinking and embrace a more fluid, evolutionary approach.
It's like we're collectively trying to unlearn an old habit.
Yeah.
We know it's not helpful, but those deeply ingrained patterns can be hard to shake off. So even without a formal clergy, there's a risk of slipping back into old habits, like viewing certain individuals as infallible authorities, or resisting change because it threatens those ingrained cultural norms.
Exactly. It's this ingrained resistance to change that can really hinder progress. And as the article points out, we can't ignore the socio-economic angle either. It raises some important questions about how inequalities might impact this process of trial and error in the real world.
This is where it gets really interesting. The article suggests that wealth and influence, even unintentional, can give certain voices more weight, right?
Yes. It makes you wonder if resources and access play a role. Do those with more resources have greater opportunities to experiment and test ideas, potentially creating an uneven playing field?
It makes sense. If you have more access to education, technology, networks, you're naturally going to have more chances to test and refine your approach. And that raises concerns about who gets to participate in this process of collective learning and who might be left out.
That's a critical point. The article also highlights the issue of unequal access to resources. limiting who can fully engage in this process. It's a complex interplay of factors, and it really underscores the importance of building systems and communities that are inclusive and equitable, ensuring everyone has the opportunity to contribute.
So how do we move forward? It sounds like there are some pretty significant barriers to overcome. But the article doesn't just leave us with a list of problems, does it? It actually offers some concrete solutions for addressing these challenges and cultivating a mindset that's truly conducive to trial and error.
You're absolutely right. It outlines 3 key strategies, and they're all interconnected in a really fascinating way. It all starts with education and capacity building, not just passively reading texts, but engaging with them critically, developing the skills to analyze information, and move beyond blind acceptance.
So it's about equipping ourselves with the tools to think critically, to question assumptions, and to engage in constructive dialogue. It reminds me of the concept of consultation within the Bahá'í Faith, which emphasizes collaborative decision-making and open communication. It's not about just following dictates, it's about actively participating in the process of understanding and applying principles.
That's a great point. And this emphasis on education. It isn't just about individual learning, it's about creating spaces within our communities for dialogue, reflection, and shared learning. Because let's face it, unlearning those old habits of clinging to certainty and fearing failure, that's not a solo mission. It requires supportive environments where people feel safe to ask questions, challenge assumptions, and even admit when they're wrong.
Exactly. We need those spaces where vulnerability is encouraged, and mistakes are seen as opportunities for growth, not sources of shame.
Yeah.
So what's the second strategy the article highlights?
The second strategy the article emphasizes is creating a culture of encouragement. And this is about, celebrating the effort, the learning process, not just the outcome. It's about shifting our focus from perfection to progress.
Yeah, and that requires, normalizing the idea that mistakes are inevitable. Yeah. And actually, like valuable stepping stones on the path to growth, it's about creating environments where people feel supported and empowered to try new things, knowing that it's okay to stumble along the way.
It makes me think of the concept of detachment within the Baha'i teachings. Not detachment in the sense of apathy, but detachment from the outcome, focusing on putting in our best effort and learning from the experience, regardless of whether we achieve immediate success.
Which is definitely easier said than done.
Yeah.
I remember when I was learning to play the piano, I would get so frustrated with myself for making mistakes. It took me a while to realize that. Those mistakes were actually helping me improve. It was through those fumbles and wrong notes that I eventually started to get better.
Yeah. It's a process, isn't it? Learning to reframe those moments of perceived failure as valuable feedback that helps us course correct and ultimately achieve our goals. And that leads us to the third strategy the article highlights, embracing humility and detachment.
Humility is such a powerful concept, especially in today's world,
Yeah.
where it can feel like everyone is trying to prove they have all the answers.
Yeah, humility in this context is about recognizing that we don't have a monopoly on truth. Our perspectives are inherently limited, and there's always more to learn. It's about being open to new ideas, even if they challenge our existing beliefs.
And being willing to let go of that attachment to being right all the time, which, let's be honest, can be a real struggle.
It can be, because when we're too attached to our own ideas, we close ourselves off to new possibilities. We become less likely to recognize our own biases, hindering growth and understanding. It's about cultivating that intellectual humility that allows us to step outside of ourselves and truly listen to others, even when we might disagree with them.
This makes me think of a quote from the Baha'i writings that says, "The heart must be free from the promptings of pride and the dictates of self." It's a reminder that true learning and growth require a certain level of humility, a willingness to set aside our egos and approach the world with a spirit of openness and receptivity.
It's a profound concept, and it really speaks to the transformative potential of this approach to trial and error. It's not just about problem solving, it's about cultivating a mindset that's open, receptive, and constantly evolving.
So how does all of this connect to the idea of trial and error as a method for societal change? I mean, we've been talking about individual growth, but the article seems to suggest this is about something much bigger, right?
Absolutely. It emphasizes that this isn't just a personal journey, it's a collective one. It's about applying this principle of trial and error to build a better world, step by step, experiment by experiment. It's about recognizing that the path to creating a more just and equitable society is a process of continuous learning and adaptation.
And this is where the parallels to the scientific method come in, right? The article talks about this fascinating idea of approaching societal change with that same scientific rigor.
Exactly. Think of it this way. We start with a hypothesis, which, in this case, would be solutions to social problems that are grounded in the Baha'i teachings, principles like unity, justice, and equality. We then experiment by putting those ideas into action within our communities.
That's where the real learning happens. We observe what works, what doesn't, and we gather data through open and honest consultation. This idea of consultation is really key within the Baha'i Faith, isn't it? It emphasizes making decisions collectively through a process of thoughtful deliberation and respectful dialogue.
Absolutely. Consultation is about harnessing the collective wisdom of the community, recognizing that no one individual has all the answers. It's about creating a space where diverse perspectives can be shared, and decisions can be made with a spirit of unity and collaboration.
So we're constantly evaluating the results of our experiments, reflecting on our experiences, and adapting our approach based on what we've learned. It's this iterative cycle of action, reflection, and adaptation that drives progress.
And it's a cycle that requires courage, humility, and a deep belief in the capacity for humanity to learn and evolve. You know, it's about recognizing that setbacks are inevitable, but they don't have to be defeats. They can be opportunities to learn, adjust our course, and keep moving forward.
I find this whole approach so inspiring. It combines a deep spiritual foundation with a practical, action-oriented framework. It feels both grounded and incredibly hopeful. It's a reminder that we all have a role to play in creating a better world, and it's a process that's accessible to everyone, regardless of their background or beliefs.
It really is a beautiful blend of principle and pragmatism, and it's a reminder that this process of trial and error, it isn't just about finding the right answers. It's about embodying the core values of the Baha'i Faith: unity, justice, collaboration, and that constant striving for betterment.
So it's not just about the destination. It's about the journey itself and how that journey shapes us, both individually and collectively. It's about creating a space for learning and growth, for ourselves and for the world around us.
And that brings us to a final thought-provoking question for you, dear listener. If trial and error is truly a path to societal transformation, what experiment could you contribute to in your own community? What small act of courage? What innovative solution? What collaborative effort could you bring to the table?
That's a powerful question to consider. Maybe it's something as simple as starting a conversation with someone who holds different views than your own, seeking to understand their perspective and find common ground. Or maybe it's something more ambitious, like working with others to address a social issue you're passionate about, applying the principles of trial and error to create positive change in your community. It really feels like this approach empowers each of us to become active participants in this grand experiment of building a better world. It's a reminder that we all have something unique to contribute.
Yeah, and it's not about achieving perfection on the first try. It's about being willing to experiment, learn from our mistakes, and just keep iterating until we find solutions that work. It's about embracing the messiness of progress and recognizing that true change often happens incrementally through a series of small steps.
What I appreciate most about this model is that it doesn't shy away from the challenges. It acknowledges the psychological, cultural, and even socio-economic barriers that can hinder our ability to fully embrace this principle of trial and error.
Right, but instead of presenting those barriers as insurmountable obstacles, it offers practical strategies for overcoming them. It empowers us to become more aware of our own biases, to cultivate humility and a willingness to learn from others, and to create supportive environments where experimentation and innovation can flourish.
This deep dive has been so eye-opening for me. It's given me a whole new perspective on what it means to embrace trial and error. It's not just a problem-solving tool. It's a way of life, a way of approaching the world with the spirit of curiosity, humility, and a commitment to continuous learning.
And remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about being willing to try, to learn, and to keep moving forward together.
It's such a hopeful and empowering message. It reminds us that we all have the potential to contribute to creating a world that reflects our highest aspirations, a world where justice, unity, and collaboration aren't just lofty ideals, but lived realities.
We encourage you, dear listener, to explore the Baha'i teachings further and see how this transformative principle of trial and error can be applied in your own life, in your community, and in the world at large.
This approach may not be easy, but it offers a powerful framework for creating the kind of world we all dream of, a world that's more just, more unified, and more reflective of the inherent nobility of every human being. So keep those experiments going and keep sharing what you learn. Until next time, keep diving deep.